The future is here. It's just unevenly distributed. And I'm here to tell you that you all need to be getting on this to figure out, how we achieve our mission.
Hello and welcome back to another great episode of Edu Unlocked with me, your host Ashish Fernando. This podcast is about the people. It's not just about institutions, education, how things are moving forward. It's about the people who are running the entire engine and who are not just making a difference to their own institutions by all the tremendous work they're doing, but they're contributors to the higher ed ecosystem as a whole. And joining us today is one such inspirational person. I've known him for a while now, Lev Gonick, who's the Chief Information Officer for Arizona State University. Lev, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks so much, Ashish, for having me. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Fantastic. And I want to give our listeners, I know most of them already know you because you're almost everywhere. I'm at conferences, you're there, you're speaking. I'm somewhere else at some event, you're there. You're hustling. And that's amazing to see that happen. So for our listeners who may not be aware of who Lev is, which is probably very few of you, Lev is widely recognized as one of the most innovative CIOs in our industry. He's leading ASU's efforts in all of its digital transformation. And honestly, for me, Lev is a 21st century CIO, right? He's building the university of the 21st century. Under his leadership, ASU has grown leaps and bounds, smart campuses, AI-driven learning, tech-enabled student successes, startup ecosystems. There's a whole lot of things packed into what Lev's been doing. So I'm excited to talk to you, Lev, today about what you think about where things are going. What are the things that motivate you, and just have a conversation around that.
Great. I'm all yours. Go for it, Ashish.
Fantastic.
Where should we begin?
Let's begin with why education. Did you stumble upon it? Was it a plan all along? Like, tell us the story, the history behind Lev getting to where he is.
Well, I actually have always been a huge believer in education in general, which is easy to say. But I've also been of the view that the university is one of the human race's most amazing institutions that was ever blueprinted, crafted, evolved over time. So I am a huge believer in the power of using the platform of education to actually develop knowledge of the future, discovery, um, opportunities to certainly uh, afford students an opportunity to actually not only learn, but to actually reveal their own sense of purpose, the opportunities for people who aspire to change the world to find a pathway through
Mm.
education. Of course, it's not the only pathway, but the pathway to leverage knowledge creation, knowledge use, knowledge dissemination. So I've been a huge believer in that. And so I actually came through the faculty ranks. I
Mm.
was a professor for many years. In 1993, which is about a lifetime ago, certainly well before you were born, Ashish, I actually took a sabbatical, which is one of those amazing privileges of being in a university environment, which gives faculty a chance to recharge and renew their research, their scholarship, whatever it is they're working on. In 1993, in the fall of 1993, I took my sabbatical
Mm.
away from my home institution, which was in Canada,
Mm.
and I landed actually in this desert in Arizona, and
Mm.
I spent the sabbatical at Arizona State University. And that same fall, this really interesting and I thought incredibly disruptive new technology was being introduced, which ended up being the Netscape Mosaic browser, the
Mm.
first internet browsers that came out of the NCSA at Illinois Supercomputing. And
Yeah.
I had this amazing luxury, Ashish. I had
Mm.
time to actually figure out what I could do to leverage the browser. And I became a little bit of a, well, here my handle at ASU during my sabbatical. I took an email handle, which was
Hmm.
cyberprof at asu.edu. And all of which is to say, I was there at the very, very beginning of sort of the ways in which we in the education community have, again, discovered, uh, made lots of, made
Hmm.
lots of progress, but also made lots of mistakes along the way, in the way that browser technology and over time, of course, many other technologies, whether that's social media, whether that's AI now, whether those are analytics and other things, all of which have become part of the portfolio of things that we do. And that's my origin story. I never went back to the traditional classroom. I'd been a traditional professor for many years,
Hmm.
but after my sabbatical, I actually, sort of took on the sort of evangelism of the ways in which technology, harnessed for good, could actually expand access to education and open or unlock the opportunities for students to discover, anything and everything.
That's amazing. Do you still have the cyberprof email ID?
I do. In fact, you can always send me an email at cyberprof@asu.edu.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm still kind of curious. What led you to go to the dry? You even called it the dry state of Arizona. Was it just random, or you wanted to go to ASU for the sabbatical?
Well, I mean, there were some personal and reasons. We had family out here
Okay.
that made it kind of inviting. And there's also these early experimenting out here in the desert with sort of new institutional forms. There was a brand new uh,
Hmm.
sister organization, which is now part of ASU, we called today the ASU West Valley. And I had some faculty colleagues who were teaching at this new school in the west side of the greater Phoenix area here. And they, what happens in sabbatical world is that you get underwritten by your home institution, but to top up your salary, you need to find a host institution who will also give you space and place
Yeah.
and people to spend time with. Brown bag lunches, conversations about future research activities. And so I had a small collection of those colleagues here at ASU in the West Valley. And I ended up also knowing several colleagues. We have three public institutions here in Arizona, ourselves here at ASU, down in Tucson at the University of Arizona, and Northern Arizona University. And I knew people at all three. So it made for me kind of a very, uh, you know, I would say optimized in terms of distance way to stay engaged. And of course, as I've already shared, my world and everyone's world got turned upside down that fall.
Yeah.
Maybe my world first. Others, I kept saying to folks, the change, the future is here. It's just unevenly distributed, and I'm here to tell you that you all need to be getting on this to figure out, how we achieve our mission.
The future is here, but it's unevenly distributed. I love that.
It's
I-
not an original, by the way, but anyway,
yeah.
but it speaks to the point of all of the work that we do, in your world, in our world, where some of us are able to see the future, some of us can articulate what that future is. In other words, not only see it but also to articulate it. And then there are a smaller set of folks who can actually do something about that. And
Yeah.
I know you're one of the doers, the dreamers, the drivers. You can do all that in your world. And I've had a bit of success in my experience as well, not only being able to see around the corner, hopefully give people some insight as to what that might look like when we chat together, and also obviously over my career, having opportunities to build and partner with others to actually achieve some of those visions.
Yeah, that's amazing. And let's actually get to that question because I rarely get to ask a CIO, how is it that your institution operates almost like an enterprise, like a corporate enterprise? There's so many things happening. There's a startup ecosystem. You're actually part of one of the biggest, like it's almost like the Woodstock of EdTech conferences, the ASU GSV conference that you're part sponsor, uh, orchestrator of. It's not very common for universities to be thinking like that about their investments and where they're spending in technology and just going. You're almost miles ahead of a lot, like 95% of the institutions in terms of innovation. How does that DNA pass through the entire leadership to everybody? Because it's hard. It's hard. I mean, I run a startup. I run a tech startup, small company of 100 plus people. It's hard, and
Yeah.
you're a juggernaut.
Well, we've grown into one, but it starts with a design, and the
Yeah.
design was to analyze the public universities and actually their predecessors as well in terms of what roles they played both historically and in context and time, and realizing that as the technological revolution of the period that I was referring to earlier began to take hold, it was there was an opportunity to go back to essentially the core mission of the public universities in this country, which really was around access.
Mm.
And over time, most public universities chose a different design model for their mission, following earlier institutions, that is to say, public universities chose over time to adopt and embrace a more elite orientation to actually recruiting students into their fold, accepting only A students from high school into college as the typical pathway into the environment. And what ASU has done, thanks to President Crow, who's really the architect of the ASU approach, is really to differentiate what are two design concepts. One is that most public universities in this country are really based on a kind of public agency model. That is to say,
Mm.
they try to negotiate with their state legislature as essentially the core funding piece of it, and then on top of that, they actually are entrepreneurial to some degree or not. As you said, that not all universities are particularly, but we all are realizing that the public agency model is actually insufficient, especially in this day and age,
Mm.
especially at this moment as you and I are talking in the life of this country, because all things are in flux at the moment. President Crow, nearly 20, well, actually 20 years ago, had a design principle, which was instead of being a public agency, we would actually be a public enterprise. And so this is to your point of us running this ship here very much like an enterprise, because the
Yeah.
answer is it was designed for just that purpose.
Designed to be.
And so we've never bemoaned the fact that we are largely publicly situated. We're not publicly funded.
Yeah.
We're situated in the state of Arizona. Our mission is to support the success of our students here in Arizona, and obviously nationwide and worldwide as well. But from the beginning, our DNA has been to be uh, entrepreneurial in the enterprising way, the use of enterprise as enterprising, to have multiple basically lines of business. Given your listenership, there's lots of
Yeah.
lines of business, and it's diversified by design to be resilient against any sort of outcome at any moment in time. And I think it has served us extremely well. This again, public enterprise orientation. It afforded us to pivot almost 15 years ago now, during one of the most important downturns in the U.S. economy. We pivoted to online as an enterprising approach to a downturn, especially impacting us here in Arizona, but it was across this
Well,
country,
yeah.
and then once again during COVID. And here, just one last point, Ashish, that I share with you is that I think most universities have to attend to these shocks, whether it's a downturn in the economy, whether it is a global pandemic. We all deal with these different challenges. Most public universities, I would observe, are especially, and the roles of their technology leaders is largely to figure out how to survive
Yeah.
those downturns. And at ASU, given our public enterprise orientation, we've never really only seen as our role to be resilient to survive. It's really been to leverage everything that we do as an enterprising enterprise to actually be focused in on how we could actually come out of these shocks better than we were before.
Hmm.
So every one of these challenges, I think we borrow from our DNA. I think that was the word you used,
Yeah.
as being enterprising to position ourselves, to be in a position to actually come out stronger, not just resilient, although that would be necessary in our view,
Yeah.
necessary but insufficient.
Insufficient. I love it. And I feel like, I mean, ASU's done a great job of managing the input and the output, the investments that come in, not just through funding, but so many other sources, like you mentioned, like state funding is not the primary source. And then the output. And now it's now a flywheel, right? Because most schools struggle. They want to innovate, they want to build, but then they struggle with how they want to fund it. And now they're just stuck in that vicious cycle. But
Yeah.
ASU's been really like smart early on with
Smart
Dr.
by
Pro
smart by design,
by
and
design.
smart by leveraging technology as an enabler. Like President Crow, when asked, and I asked him, when he recruited me, like, what differentiates ASU from so many of the other great universities in this country? And he said it's clock speed. We are
Mm,
moving faster than most everyone else. And I said, so what accounts for the clock speed difference? And he said, we embrace technology as the
yeah,
enabler of the clock speed, which affords us an opportunity to reach our charter, our goals of having, again, accessibility to learning for as many people, especially in Arizona, but from around the world, who want to join us, and doing it obviously at scale, and having impact on those students and hopefully their life journeys.
that's amazing. I'm gonna actually steal that clock speed from Dr. Crow, because it summarizes a lot of things. It summarizes the agility of your teams. It summarizes how you build product, use technology. It's all in that one thing. It's basically, we have a mission and we're just moving fast towards
The, the
that.
truth
I
is,
love
the truth is that when I talk to my counterparts, across the country, um, it's in our case, it's not rhetorical, like it's not
it.
lip
Yeah,
service.
it's not.
I think a lot of people kind of have all routinely asked me, so Lev, when are you guys going to slow down? When are you going to stop? What you're doing. The answer is we're actually genetically incapable of doing that, because we are in our DNA committed to actually maintaining and actually accelerating, especially right now with all of the different challenges that are out there. Some of them technological challenges, some of them are economic, some of them are political. To actually accelerating the full breadth of the opportunity sets that we have in front of us. And again, many of them are quite entrepreneurial. We are focused in on global markets. We are focused in on supporting, for example, 18,000 of our students are actually returning veterans. Uh, no one even comes close to those numbers outside of the military academies that are there, but even by size, those are just huge numbers of veterans and their families who are part of our learning environment. And we do it because it's core to our mission. We also do
Mm.
it because we've identified relatively untapped markets for opportunities. We partner with the military in important ways that relatively few institutions have done in an integrated fashion as we've done. And so it's, again, these are by design efforts to reach new markets, to again advance our mission here in Arizona. We work extensively with both rural and tribal communities in their education journeys in ways that are very creative and we think relevant, and hopefully of value, obviously, to those communities as they continue to invest in us for their teachers, or for their agronomists, or for people who are working on water systems and water conservation or GIS or any number of other things.
Love it. Love it. Lev, in the interest of time, for our listeners who are from the startup community, founders, it's, I mean, you're one person I really want to ask this question, because you're always out there. You're talking to a lot of startups. You're trying to see what's out there with technology. You're really at the forefront, but you're within an institution. So your thoughts on this is going to be very important. There's a lot of startups in edtech that struggle because edtech's a very different beast altogether, right? It's slow, but it's long. Once you get in, it's long.
The
But
sales cycles are very long.
sell, yeah, yeah. And also the stickiness. Once you get
Yeah,
through that sales cycle, and once
yeah,
you're partnered,
right.
then and you're doing a decent job, you're doing a good job, you got a longevity. Uh, what is your observation based on all the startups you meet at all these GSV conferences, and everybody and their dogs are pitching to you about a new product and how it's going to transform, and you also have an innovation hub internally. So for founders, how should they be thinking of building solutions that fit an innovative institution like ASU, and how would they partner with an institution like ASU? What should they be thinking? Maybe some things you've observed that, hey, 70% of these founders do this thing wrong.
All right.
Would love to hear.
Right. Well, again, as you and I were discussing actually off camera, there are different kinds of startups. There's pre-seed, two people, in a garage who've got an idea. There are folks who are obviously, maybe it's with friends and family investment, and they've got a early,
A little
MVP
bit of cash, yeah.
that they want to kind of socialize. And then there are folks who are, in a more traditional sense, early stage investable, not because they have revenue just yet, but they actually have a product. And so, the way I generally counsel folks is in the following way. Uh, when I take a look at a pitch, I'm looking at three things. One is I'm looking to see whether or not the actual core idea is aligned to one of our strategic outcomes. In other words,
Mm,
um, you know, if someone is basically at this point in our career, in the life cycle of all products and services for our higher education, is talking to me about a new widget that ties into a learning management system. My view is that actually you're not in the right race. You're
mm,
not running in the right race because for our institution, while there's lots of opportunities for point solutions, when a startup is in that space, I'm looking to figure out if they're in the right race. Secondly,
yeah.
whether or not they've got the right horse to run in that race, which is as is their idea actually, based on solid technical grounds, not kind of conceptual, but like, is there actually a solid technology that is aligning here? And some of that is deep technical inspection, the architecture of the actual product set that's out there. And then the third piece is like, are you the right jockey on the horse running the right race? And
Mm,
the jockey is actually the leadership. It's you. It's your CTO. It's probably, if you're a startup, not more than those, the founder, the CTO, and maybe the VP for sales, or whatever it is that are your first two or three founders along the way.
yeah.
And I make a calculation. I make a calculation as to whether or not I want to spend time, not because you've got the whole package. That's one of the challenges that I, chat with founders about all the time.
Mm,
It's like, do you have the right combination of
yeah.
one, two, and three? And I'm happy to. And I oftentimes say, hey, listen, I'm not interested in the race you're running, and I'm not interested in the horse that you're on, but I'm interested in you. Or maybe I'm not actually all that interested in you, but I'd be really interested in the technology area that you're working in, and
Yeah.
would love to learn more. So again, the general
Mm,
orientation here is universities, are of interest to founders in just two ways. One is as an investor, and there are very few universities who generally look to the startup ecosystem for first money in. That's
yeah.
rare. Does that happen? There are small
Yes.
pots of money. We have small pots of money that we invest in.
Mm,
Much of it with third party, with playing with other people's money, but we also do it with some of our own money. And the other piece of it really is really seeing the university as a strategic. In other words, if things work out, if you have two of the three ingredients that we're interested in, we may say to you, listen, we will work with you. ASU will work with you to actually create the MVP, or to take your MVP and actually attune it, or get it ready for use in our setting. And by the way, our setting
mm.
is not anybody else's setting. Once you've worked with one university, even if it's a university like ASU, don't think that you've got basically a package
A
ready,
replicable,
a
yeah.
replicable piece of it, because you have to understand that. But usually in exchange for equity, small, but in exchange for equity, we're willing to essentially be seen as a strategic, a customer. From time to time, I will make very small investments in a paid POC along the way, just so that the startup can say, I actually have not only ASU as a strategic, but they're actually paying
A
for
paid
it.
customer.
and
Yeah.
and and those are, those are the journeys. And we've had, at ASU, we've probably seen, well, at this point, thousands of startups. We've taken a look at it, and we've partnered, and usually in the strategic way that I've described, probably 3 to 400 of them. We have investment positions in about 60 to 70 of them. We've realized some exits along with the founders along the way, or acquisitions in one way, so but liquidity events with more than a dozen of them along the way. And as you say, I mean, that's just more entrepreneurial than most. I just last word. I just spent some time with a group of our student founders in the
Mm.
AI space. We actually have a Verizon uh, funded entrepreneurship and innovation student group.
Yeah.
And they actually, there were 40 of them, all founders working in the AI space, not just ed tech, but including
Everywhere.
ed tech activities. And like, that's another source where, again, ASU attracts students who are both obviously technical or business interested and curious, along with obviously having the chops and this fortitude to do what you do, which is to make a run at it at the opportunity to help change the world.
That's amazing. I mean, even those numbers you mentioned, like, they're in the thousands, in the hundreds in terms of investment. That's rare. Yeah, absolutely. Not many institutions do that, but that's why I think a lot of startups are also so interested in wanting to partner with ASU, because there's a chance to get ASU as an investor, as a potential customer, and as an incubator. Like, it's just pretty amazing what y'all have achieved there. But this is very helpful, Lev, I think, for a lot of founders who are thinking about how to approach the institution. Like, I'm a big fan of try it and then buy it, right? A lot of startups think that they want to sell and charge whatever they have to charge. In my case, I always think that you at least want to give your institutions 3 to 6 months to try it out. And a lot of people like yourself who are innovative, who can see an idea and spot the future,
Yeah.
will give that opportunity to start up.
Yeah, and just for a level set to the people who are watching, uh, it is almost. I mean, I can't think of a scenario where someone in a startup, in an early stage startup, would come to me and that I would buy anything other than a paid POC, and that actually follows the strategy that you just shared, which is
Yeah.
our folks have had a chance to kick the tires. There's a use case which we think could tie back to student success in one way, shape, or form across the full breadth of what that might mean, in our environment. And then and only then, would we have a further conversation about, a licensing arrangement or something of
Mm.
that sort. So I do think that the challenge that, again, this is why in general, startups, founders like yourself, this is not for the faint of heart. You have to have staying power, fortitude, vision, be stubborn, all the things I know you are, in a very
Appreciate
positive way, in a very positive way.
it.
But you also have to have a business model that makes sense, and that takes more patient capital than oftentimes founders are able to secure. Because it's not only the sales cycle that's takes time, it's the opportunity to work with an ASU to
Yeah.
actually iterate on the design and the development of the product in a way that can't happen out of the starting gates. And so we do, obviously, as you mentioned, ASU GSV. It's a gathering not only of literally thousands of startups, but it's literally many hundreds of investors. And those investors who come to ASU GSV, especially that we've done it now for almost 15 years, uh, understand the cycle and understand that you can be impatient, patient
Yeah.
capital. Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to be able to see the investment horizon as more than during, for example, in the AI moment that we're in right now. Certainly, especially if you're a serial entrepreneur and a serial founder, you can get your money, your capital is investing in you as the jockey. You're in the right race. You probably have the right idea. and people can realize very quick returns as long as you realize if that's your business plan that you're getting in to get out. In higher education, in ed tech, that is very much, I would continue to suggest, a rarity that's there in part because we're not inclined as customers to provide enough momentum to realize that quick set of multiples that you need to show investors that allows them to find someone to acquire you and give them the return thereafter.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well said. And I don't think I was actually thinking in my mind of any better analogy I could use than a race and a horse and a jockey. There's none. That's so well said, actually.
And again, not original. I should say that Dave Morgenthaler, one of the original venture capitalists, period, in this country,
Yeah,
who is from my home city, taught me that 25 years ago, and it has stuck with me. And I think that's another very important thing for founders to do is to talk, to seasoned professional investors, others who've been serially successful, and obviously customers, to actually learn from them and take those lessons to heart. Dave Morgenthaler, has passed many years ago now, but
yeah.
that analogy is his, and I often invoke it as I have today.
That's amazing. Thank you. And that's actually a really good segue into my concluding question, which is important for people who are listening in and they've tuned in because they saw, oh, Ashish is doing a podcast with Lev. How do I become a CIO at an institution, right? Aspiring to be that. So you just alluded to the fact that you take a lot of lessons from people. What are some of those ingredients that have brought you to become this, and ingredients in the form of mentors? There could be people that you've really looked up to and learned from, books, or any other way in which you've learned to like progress and get to where you are.
Yeah, so I think there is some natural ingredients that are important. If you're not curious, again, I'm going to speak
Yeah.
specifically about CIOs in higher education. So, curiosity is a hugely important ingredient. Certainly, a mindset, a growth mindset, is hugely important. Certainly a predisposition to embracing ambiguity.
Hmm.
This is not a this ours is not an industry with much command and control. I think a lot of folks who come from other industries have a hard time navigating that reality, and it's hard for them to progress through the professional ranks to come in. That's certainly been the case as we look back to CIOs who haven't necessarily found the kind of professional life they're interested in the world of education, having come from the outside. I think from the inside, is what I've often shared with folks is the work of a CIO in higher education is really around obviously vision, alignment with the rest of the executive of the institution. Those are things that you can eventually, you can learn and become good at over time. What you have to have is passion as well for the mission
Yeah.
of the institution. And if it's just a job, there are plenty of universities who will hire competent, capable CIOs as managers. But if you want to be a CIO leader, my view is that passion to the mission is a central ingredient. It's both the necessary and sufficient condition for folks. And then the only last thing I'd say here is, I shared with you at the beginning of our chat, that I came through the faculty ranks, but I also learned over time, having mentored and spent time deep in the essentially the sausage making part of the way technology gets developed and deployed, in the networking world, in the security world, in the identity world, in the applications world, and of course in the teaching and learning side of it as well.
Mm.
And so I counsel folks who are looking to pursue a executive level work in as a CIO to actually not be a one trick pony, not just to have one set of things that you can do. If you can show the institution that you have hopefully deep experience in the key attribute sets, then you're going to be of interest to a lot of different kinds of institutions. And I think I would just sort of the last concluding remark is that I think at last count I have 8 former deputy CIOs or people who worked with me who are now university CIOs, and I think
Wow.
when they reflect on it, I think they would say some of what I've just shared with you was important to them as well.
Wow, that is such a strong stat. That's amazing. And I'm
It's,
sure,
it's, it's actually part of my job. I mean, that's part of my job is to support the development of my team, and
yeah,
for some of them, that is, of course, to help them become CIOs.
that's just such a strong value of a leader, and I love that. I love that, and I'm sure they attribute a lot of their success to working with you and learning from all the things that you've learned. This has been amazing, Lev. Thank you so much for sharing all your thoughts with us, and I'm truly happy that I could talk to you. I've been waiting for this particular podcast episode. We had to reschedule it a couple of times here and there, but we
Right.
finally did it, and I'm so glad. Thank you.
Well, great, Ashish, and we'll look forward to seeing you and maybe some of your viewers and listeners at the ASU GSV meeting in early April in San Diego. If you're in the startup world, there's no other place you need to be to understand what Ashish, you and I have been talking about today. All right, we'll see you there.
Awesome. And thank you to all our listeners as well for joining another episode of Edu Unlocked with me, Ashish, and our guest for today, Lev Gonick, the CIO of Arizona State University. Thank you so much, everybody.